Sajid Javid has said he is disappointed that 5 international England footballers are refusing to have the coronavirus vaccine. The Health Secretary warned the stars that they are role models for youngsters and should be encouraging them to get the jab. He issued an appeal to the players to help protect themselves and those around them by getting their doses. Now, this is a different tone to the one he struck in an earlier interview, in which he said that care workers in England should get out and get another job if they don't want to be vaccinated. Well, maybe he should get out and get another job. He did just that when he resigned as Chancellor last year in a row with Dominic Cummings and the PM. Senior figures in the care industry have begun to raise serious concerns that the deadline for workers to be fully vaccinated is too soon and could lead to damaging staff shortages. Welcome to a pandemic so bad the authorities are planning to fire thousands of care home staff and other health professionals as we enter a challenging winter. What's worse, an unvaccinated healthcare worker or no healthcare worker at all? Now, I welcomed the arrival of the vaccine, and as you know, I'm double jabbed. But vaccinating absolutely everyone, even those at minuscule risk, has now become a religion, an ideology, a cult. When so many globally are in need, surely we should be sharing our supplies. And cast your mind back to early in the pandemic and the words of the then Health Secretary, the government's chipolata smuggler-in-chief, Matt Hancock. This is the man who said that once the vulnerable had been vaccinated, we could get on with our lives. I say encourage people to have the vaccine, no problem. Make it easy, sure. But don't ride roughshod over people's basic human rights. Don't threaten them with social exclusion and don't demonise them. And most reprehensibly, don't threaten their employment. It's not acceptable in a free society, and it does nothing to help the vaccine cause. The more coercion that is deployed, the harder the pushback will be from those who are unsure. Strong evidence now shows that the most robust immunity beyond that of the vaccine itself comes from healthy members of the public getting COVID and recovering. But it's now those self-same healthy members of the population, including children and now fit beyond belief Premier League footballers, that the government are going after. This after the JCVI said that we shouldn't jab the over-12s, but the government press on anyway. It just doesn't make any sense. But the vaccine cult is a global phenomenon. And here is Rand Paul, Senator of Kentucky and a medical physician himself, brilliantly taking down one such vaccine proponent. And he begins by citing a peer-reviewed study into natural immunity from COVID.
An Israeli study that had 2.5 million patients and found that the vaccinated group was actually 7 times more likely to get infected with COVID than the people who had gotten COVID naturally.
Senator, I'd have to get back to you on that one. I'm not familiar with that study.
Well, you think you might want to be if you're going to travel the country insulting the millions of Americans, including NBA star Jonathan Isaac, who have had COVID, recovered, look at a study with 2.5 million people and say, well, you know what? It looks like my immunity is as good as a vaccine or not. And in a free country, maybe I ought to be able to make that decision. Instead, you've chosen to travel the country calling people like Jonathan Isaac and others, myself included, flat earthers. We find that very insulting, goes against the science. Are you a doctor or a medical doctor?
I've worked over 30 years on health policy.
You're not a medical doctor. Do you have a science degree? And yet you travel the country calling people flat earthers who have had COVID, looked at studies of millions of people, and made their own personal decision that their immunity they naturally acquired is sufficient. But you presume somehow to tell over 100 million Americans who have survived COVID that we have no right to determine our own medical care. You alone are on high, and you've made these decisions, a lawyer with no scientific background, no medical degree. This is an arrogance coupled with an authoritarianism that is unseemly and un-American.
Boom! Now, there may be some in vulnerable groups who choose not to have the vaccine. I can't imagine why, but it is a matter of personal choice. And ultimately, though I wouldn't advise it, it is a human right to not have the vaccine, to get COVID and be ill with it, because the only alternative is having a society where we literally strap people to a chair and jab them against their will. I shouldn't be giving the government any ideas. So what are the vax facts? Well, it's great at reducing hospitalisations and tragic COVID deaths, but you can still catch COVID and transmit it, which means that COVID passports, endless testing of healthy asymptomatic people and bullying those who have opted not to be jabbed isn't just wrong, but the stuff of nightmares. Welcome to hell. Speaking of hell, just when you thought New Zealand couldn't get any more woke under the holy, sacred leadership of Saint Jacinda Ardern, the University of Otago have awarded trans weightlifter Laurel Hubbard with the title of Sportswoman of the Year. Now, I'm ultra pro-trans, and I've got close friends that have been on that important and joyous journey. But this award rubs salt into the wounds of all women participating in female sport. How many biological females have missed out on this award? This university, typically for the woke world of higher education, is doubling down on what is called gender ideology, which rejects the idea that there are two biological sexes, a man and a woman. Now, I believe passionately that you must be recognised and acknowledged as whatever gender by which you identify. Transphobia is just as evil and wrong as homophobia, for example. If you were born Stephen and you are now Stephanie, you are Stephanie and you are she, her. But you're not a biological woman. I'm not alone in this view. Apart from most women, it's also a view shared by Caitlyn Jenner, surely the most famous trans woman in the world and a hero of mine. Here's what she had to say.
Question of fairness. That's why I oppose biological boys who are trans competing in girl sports in school. It just isn't fair.
How right she is. It's time now for someone to stand up for women, to speak up for and defend female physiology, female private spaces and female sport. The war on women has got to stop.